Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Working Class Hollywood. Before I get started with today's guest, who is a phenomenal one, I just want to give a big thank you to everyone for all the feedback I've been getting on iTunes. The show has 75-star ratings now, which is awesome. There's been some great reviews left this week about how helpful the interviews are, how much people are learning from the guests, and I just love hearing that people are enjoying the show and that it's helping them as they navigate their own careers. I want to keep this feedback train going, so I'm going to ask for your guys' help again. If you are listening and you are enjoying the show, do me a big favor. Go onto iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening and subscribe. Leave a rating. Write me a review. Those are so helpful to boost the podcast in the iTunes search results, and it'll just help get these interviews into more people's ears that can benefit from the knowledge that my guests are bringing. All right, enough self-promotion. Let's get to the show. Welcome to Working Class Hollywood, conversations with people that make the movies, TV shows, and entertainment you love. If you're looking to break into or move up in the entertainment industry, or you're just a fan of content and want to hear about how it's made, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Jeremiah Smith.
Endemol gave me a call. They remembered my role on the show those last 5 seasons. So we're starting right now, staffing up, and over the next 15 to 17 weeks, will be preparation and casting, and it'll be 15 weeks of production. So we'll do 10 episodes in 15 weeks, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to double up, have 2 builds happening at the same time. Then we'll be done. We'll post through December, and hopefully it'll air in January of 2020.
Today's guest is such a good one. Brady Connell is a showrunner for reality TV that has been doing this since before reality TV really existed. Brady's resume is got to be one of the best out there. He worked on the first season of Survivor. He worked on the first season of Amazing Race. He was the showrunner on Extreme Makeover Home Edition, where I met him. He runs The Great Christmas Light Fight on ABC, which has been on the air for 7 years now. He is such a successful guy, but he's also one of the nicest guys that you'll ever meet, and he gives some really great advice to anyone out there that's looking to get into television or entertainment in general. Anyone that's a fan of Extreme Makeover Home Edition or reads the trades may know that HGTV just picked up 10 new episodes of Extreme Makeover Home Edition. They're rebooting the show this year, and Brady has been chosen to showrun it. And when I interviewed Brady, he had literally just closed his deal with Endemol, so he was able to speak publicly about it, I think, for the very first time. So I may be breaking some big entertainment news on the podcast here. We talk all about it. We talk about how the show's going to be different, how they're developing the format for HGTV versus ABC. It's really interesting. Anyway, you guys, my conversation with Brady was so fun. You guys are going to love it. Here is me and reality showrunner Brady Connell. Hi, Brady.
What's up, Jeremiah?
How's it going?
Great.
So I'll give a little backstory. So Brady, I had the great honor and pleasure of working with Brady for the final season of Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And while I wasn't working directly under Brady, because there were 2 separate teams and crews on the show, which we'll probably talk a little bit about. But he's definitely around, and run into him, and I always just struck me as like one of the nicest human beings on the planet. And then I was able to work with Brady again on 2 seasons of The Great Christmas Light Fight on ABC, which is another show that Brady has done.
And unlike Extreme, it stayed on the air. So when you worked on the show, I just want to make it clear that Extreme did not leave the air because Jeremiah.
Well, I honestly, I thought about that. I was like, I was like the curse of death. Like I came in the last season and just like everyone's pumped and we want more episodes. And just like no.
Yeah.
But
every show runs its course.
Yeah, 9 seasons.
But I'll blame it on you anyway.
So Brady, tell me, where are you from and how did you end up in Los Angeles?
I'm an LA guy.
Born and raised.
LA dude. Yeah, because I actually grew up in the Valley.
Oh, wow.
San Fernando Valley in Woodland Hills, and went to El Camino High School out there. And just, when you're in LA, I think you do sort of get surrounded by the entertainment industry, whether you like it or not.
Were your parents in the industry?
My dad was a writer, story guy, and artist. Also, worked for Walt Disney. Back in the day, he actually was a founding charter member of the Walt Disney Studios in 1939.
Wow,
he was an older guy.
You're like Hollywood royalty.
Well, yeah, I don't know. He was a pretty quiet and humble guy. So he was, working in the back rooms, and he wasn't like one of the big animators or anything, but he was certainly involved. His name was Brady Connell, and he ended up doing the Mickey Mouse newspaper strip for 25 years for Disney, and did a lot of the comic book writing. He probably wrote, I'm told he wrote over 2,000 comic book stories.
Oh, wow.
In his whole career. But anyway, by the time I got out of college and was, thinking about the entertainment industry, everybody he knew was already dead, pretty much, or retired. But he introduced me to one guy, and that one guy introduced me to his son, and his son happened to have a small production company, and they were doing behind the scenes, docu stuff for the Disney Channel. And I started as a PA and got my first credit as a PA, and that was in 1986.
Growing up, did you always think and want to work in the entertainment industry?
Not at all. Not like your other guests. I was clueless. Even though my dad was kind of, peripherally involved, no interest. I was all about like public service, and I was just kind of wanting to get into, something public. And I don't know why, but I just was attracted to that. Never even thought about entertainment until my very last year at UCLA. I was a history major, took a history of film class. And as a part of that class, you had to take an internship. Yeah. And that internship turned out to be that job. That my dad introduced me to this guy, and I worked at the production company for 3 days a week as an intern, not getting paid. It was part of a field studies program, and I loved the class, history of film. I was like, wow, this is so cool. Yeah. And I ended up doing my big final paper on Walt Disney. So I just sort of got connected to sort of feel good programming from the very beginning. And it all went on from there.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what was the company that you were working at? Like what kind of, you said they were doing like behind the scenes at Disney? Like what does that mean?
Yeah. So there are, back in the day, I still assume there are a lot of companies that are doing this, but it was just, they were called, what were they called? I can't even remember. Anyway, they're just behind the scenes companies that go on film shoots and would shoot Betacam, with Betacam brick tapes or in old Betacam tapes and brick batteries, and just shooting what was ever happening on set that day, and then interview the celebrities and then put it all together in a little junket tape. And
so they'd be like either like the bonus. I mean, I guess there probably wasn't DVDs back then, but like they would like air on TV, like to promote the film, or
they would send out VHSs, or 3/4 inches actually was what went out to all the press companies around the country, and it was a good start. And then they were doing a Disney Channel documentary series interviewing all the old, like 9 Old Men and all the old people who worked at Disney back in the day. So I happened to have a particular interest in all that because of my dad. And learned, how to do an interview. And anyway, the guy's name was Carden Walker, and his father was E. Carden Walker, who actually was the CEO of Disney for a little while after Walt passed away. Yeah. Wow. So I had that little connection, but that was it. I didn't know anyone else. And so it was definitely one of those things where you start at the bottom and literally going to the market and buying food for everybody at lunch and Xeroxing and the whole thing. I'm sure you've heard that from all your other guests too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you do, right? When you start out, you start at the bottom.
It doesn't really matter what your education was, at least in the area that I got into. You just have to be willing to start at the bottom, unless you know somebody who can accelerate your early career.
That was one of the things, because my first job out of college was at the talent agency, and that's actually one of the things that I appreciated about that was that it was kind of like the mailroom was like the great equalizer, right? So I was coming off of, I also went to UCLA. I forgot that we're fellow Bruins. Nice. And I literally put myself through school, waiting tables, nights and weekends to pay for it, and then I landed in the mailroom, and I'm sitting there with people that were like, whose dad was Jim Carrey's tennis coach, or people that had all gone to like Ivy League schools and had JD MBAs and this and that. But it's like once you landed in that mailroom, it was kind of like we all had like our oversized baggy suits, like pushing the mail cart, going on errands, and like I think I was able to do just as well as the guys that were like coming in. So yeah,
Totally.
I think you start at the bottom and you work your way up wherever you come from, which is good, I think, because you learn, right?
It is. In the entertainment industry, people forget that. Like, you think you have to go to film school or whatever, but no, you could just, as long as you work hard and you have a good attitude and you're relatively creative and, you know, you're a team player, you're going to do well. And it doesn't even matter if you went to college. I hate to say that. You know, you want to go because you want to be educated and know a little bit about the world, and it certainly helps you when you get out. You know, some people, there's always, you know, most of the major universities around the country have a little bit of an alumni connection with the alums in LA or in New York, and will help you out. So that's worth it. But the reality is, if you didn't go to college, you just get a job and start working hard and you're good to go.
Yeah. We don't really check diplomas and, you know, grade transcripts and stuff in this industry.
And one bit of advice, I mean, just because you've got, I don't know who's listening to your podcast, there's a lot of
thousands
aspiring
and thousands
people.
of people.
And I'll try to keep it in the context so that your listeners do have some, you know, some takeaway from all this. But I really love seeing resumes that have that don't have film school on their resume.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice. Of course, it's great. I know they know certain things, but I'm way more interested in seeing a well-rounded person who was an English literature major or whatever, you know, just, you know, learn something about the world. And we can teach all the other stuff, you know, or you learn all that stuff within a couple of years, you know, in the work environment. Yeah. But I got to tell you, some of the worst interviews I've ever had were with people who just went to film school, and that's, you know, that's it. That's all they got to talk about.
Yeah. I think
when they do their film on, you know, film students in New York City, that's their big project.
Right. Exactly. I think I've said before on the show, I always love seeing like those, like additional skills and hobbies or interests, like that kind of stuff. Like, because those are always this thing. You're like, okay, education, whatever. But if you see someone who's like, oh, like spent a year in Guatemala building houses, that's the thing I always latch on to. Like, oh, tell me about that. And like, you know, it's not just the school, it's more the experience that I also respond to.
Absolutely. Especially if you're going to get into like reality television or nonfiction television, you want people who are worldly and are curious about places and things and people. You know, if someone has done that in their past, I'm assuming that they are naturally curious and want to get out there and see the world. Or if you're going to be a writer, you know, you gotta have something to write about. Yeah. It may be a little different if you're doing more of a trade, if you're going to do the grip thing, or you're going to be, you know, camera operator. But if you're going to be on the creative side or on the doc side, you want somebody who has a worldly view. Totally. So tell me, how did you sort of like find your way? Like, you were PAing for this company, doing behind the scenes stuff. Like, where did it go from there? What was your path? Yeah, I think everybody, again, if someone's listening who's just getting started, you know, you got to just get in somewhere. You got to find some job somewhere to make a living. But then you do have to, you know, really analyze the business. For me, I wanted to be a film director, just like everybody, like full on film director. That was it. I don't know what I was doing working for this, you know, this Disney Channel show, but still, I thought everything I was going to do was going to lead to being a film director. Yeah. You know, by the time you're 30, you got to direct your first film and all that. And this is back in the, you know, late 80s and the 90s. And I wrote a couple of scripts. I actually sold one script, which was fun and, you know, helped me get going a little bit. But I kept getting sucked into nonfiction work, which happens to a lot of people in this genre of the business. But I was kicking and screaming the whole time. So in the late 80s and all through the 90s, nobody aspired to work in reality television. I can't think of one person that said, I want to be a showrunner in reality television. It just wasn't the thing. Well, it didn't really exist. There was nonfiction programming, but it wasn't the genre of entertainment that it is now. Right. I mean, I worked on Rescue 911, for example. And I was working on a kids game show just as a writer, just to keep them some money coming in. Down the hall, there was a guy who was working on this show called Rescue 911. This is 1989, I think. And I got the job on it because they wanted me to go on the road and just go out in the field, and maybe I could do some second unit directing. That was what was interesting to me. Anyway, that was the first time I ever heard the word reality. It was like maybe 1990, after the show had been on for a year. And then there was Unsolved Mysteries and a bunch of other, you know, shows like that. The Cops was coming out then. And then, but still, the 90s was, other than those key shows, it wasn't like it was an explosion of reality television. It was just a few shows that were doing okay. And then there were like wildlife shows and, you know, and travel shows that were on cable. Was America's Funniest Home Videos on at that point? Yeah, no, I actually joined that show or America's Funniest People, which is a sister show to Funniest Videos, in 1993. That's how I got in the Directors Guild. But yeah, there were shows here and there. But I wanted to get out. I wanted to get out of reality television. I mean, I enjoyed it. I got to travel all over the place. You know, somebody else paying for you to travel is always good. Yeah. But I was planning on taking all those skills and writing the Great American Script and going and directing my big film. And I was a history major, like I said, so I was going to make big, like, Schindler's List and Glory and Dances with Wolves and Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, those are the movies.
Period pieces, really, epic sweeping tales.
Totally, very inspiring, And I still, dream about that, of course, and I have a bunch of files and stuff. But you got to work. I mean, again, for your listeners, you have to make money. You can be a starving artist for only so long. And I would not take some reality show jobs specifically to work on my script or to try and, get out there and raise some money maybe for a film. But I'd be broke, and then I'd go back to working whatever job there was. I did a couple short films along the way, like a 20-minute short film with the UCLA extension program, and then a 5-minute film, and those did really well on the film festival circuit. By the time I was done with them, I was so broke I had to go back to work in reality. So then finally, I did a wildlife show called Wild Things with Bertrand Van Munster, who did The Amazing Race, who created The Amazing Race. So that was 3 years running around the world, going to India and Alaska and everywhere. So that was fun, but it wasn't until Survivor hit, in 2000, and then it all changed. But there was, I would say, 15 years there of thinking that my path was going to be different than what it ended up being, which is totally fine.
And then you accepted your fate.
Yeah, honestly. I also kind of said, okay, I can make a living. It looks like I can make a living in this nonfiction space, and just decided to go with it, because it was definitely a roller coaster ride from 2000 on.
Yeah. So you were on the first season of Survivor, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me how did you get that job? How did you end up there?
Crazy. So again, I had the weirdest resume. I mean, I did Japanese game shows and kids glop shows, and then wildlife programming. It made no sense. My mom was like, "What are you doing?" But that resume, just by chance, happened to be pretty much the perfect resume for Survivor. So I met a guy named Mike Sears, who was the original. Actually, my girlfriend at the time introduced me to Mike Sears, which was really nice. And then he loved everything about my resume, and we talked. And then I met Mark Burnett and Craig Peligian, who I'd worked with Craig Peligian before, who's a big reality and executive producer now. And they hired me, and so I was pretty much the one of the 4 people on Survivor. There was Mark and Craig, and then Scott, a guy named Scott Messick, and I were the 4 people who were really, kind of in charge of getting Survivor going. Mark, of course, it's Mark's vision. It was his show. Mark is amazing, really, really an intuitive EP who had not done that much television before Survivor. He did Discovery Channel, he did the Eco Challenge show.
Right.
But I had already done like 15 years of reality, and all of a sudden, there's this guy, Mark, who's just so talented and creative, and I was like, I love this guy. So I was ready to do anything for him, and I was hired to basically oversee the essentially the adaptation of it was a European format, and Americanize it, and oversee all the creative of the show except for directing. Like Scott was more the director guy, and I was like, hire the writers and oversaw the whole production design department, the art department, and the challenge department, because I was a challenge guy too. I had done a lot of challenges on kids' game shows. So it was fantastic. It was a network primetime show with big challenges, and worked with Jeff Probst very closely to figure out what he was going to say and what was going to happen to all the contestants on the island. And it was it was definitely lightning in a bottle.
And where did they shoot that first season?
It was an island called Pulau Tiga off the west coast of Malaysian Borneo. I will never forget it.
And so you came on in like the pre-production development stage, and then you guys, I imagine, flew down the location and like set it all up and everything. Did you know at that time, like when you were producing the show, like did you have a feeling that like this is going to be just like a sensation, like this is going to like change the face of television as we know it, or not?
Well, I was going to say yes until you just said the last part. But I mean, whatever. Everybody thinks they knew something, but I had done enough reality TV at that point where I was like, this is going to be great. Like I felt that. I said that to the whole staff. I'm like, I've never seen anything like this. It's a great concept. CBS, Les Moonves, who was the head of CBS at the time, is totally supporting it, giving us enough money to do this incredible social experiment. And we're going to knock it out of the park. And it really felt great. And it was a terrific cast. And with Mark's leadership and Craig's leadership, I knew it was going to be something special. Actually, Mark, it feels weird telling you the story, but I remember on the island, Mark was like, Brady, what do you think we got something here? And because I don't know, he just was curious. He's taking a poll. And I said, yeah, Mark, this is great. You're going to get I think you're going to get 4 or 5 seasons out of this. That was like the best that my brain at the time could possibly imagine. You're going to get 5 seasons out of it. He's in season 32 or 6 or something.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to speak in hyperbole here, and maybe it's just because I work in reality, but what piece of entertainment has been more influential and change? I mean, that in my mind, Survivor changed television. It was, like you said, it was all these sort of hodgepodgey shows, and that show hit. It became such a massive success that now, I mean, we have an entire genre of television and entertainment around the world that I think the DNA can all be traced back to that and the real world. And tell me if I'm wrong. This is just me sort of soapboxing here, but it really I think a lot of thousands and thousands of people and millions and hundreds and millions of ad dollars and everything can all owe it. They all owe it to Survivor, right?
Yeah, and then Survivor owes it to the Unsolved Mysteries and Rescue 911s of the world, and then they owe it to Candid Camera and the Louds documentary on PBS. It all builds on each other. But I can remember throughout the 90s, everybody thinking, well, that reality is just sort of it's stalemate. I mean, there's no way it's going to go anywhere farther than it is here. And then, yes, when Survivor hit, it opened a floodgate of just ideas and creators. And yes, 2000 to 2003 in particular will stand out in television history as a transformative just couple of years. When you think about it, Big Brother, Amazing Race, all those shows, Bachelor, all happened at that exact same time.
Yeah.
And it was because of the success of Survivor that everyone, all their old ideas that they had, maybe they started coming out, and buyers, all the buyers at the networks were like, yeah, let's do it. It sounds good.
Yeah.
Because we want to ride this wave. And it worked. And there were a lot of talented people. I think people forget, Mark was super talented, but he was also very smart about hiring talented, strong storytellers. And he would pay top dollar for good editor. You heard this on one of your other podcasts, I think. He didn't hold back on hiring the right people, and it attracted just a lot of talent. And then there were just a handful of us at the time who kind of knew how to do that programming, thanks to Mark and some others. And then we started getting snatched up by other shows. And CBS because CBS did Survivor, they wanted somebody from Survivor to go do The Amazing Race. So that was sort of how I ended up on The Amazing Race. And really enjoyed that because it was another challenge,
the season 1, right?
Yeah.
So you launched Survivor.
I didn't, but
no, you did. You were.
I was with the team that launched Survivor.
You were on the team that launched Survivor,
Yeah.
And then you got plucked by the network to go launch Amazing Race.
Yeah, well, in the middle there was Eco Challenge. So Mark's baby was Eco Challenge, which, by the way, is coming back on Amazon Prime, I think, which is great after all these years. Terrific show. And as a director, still an aspiring director, I thought Eco Challenge was the pinnacle of nonfiction directing. So Mark nicely asked me after Survivor, because I directed a few of the challenges on Survivor when Scott was editing. I ended up, saying yes, being a good company guy. And Mark asked me to direct Eco Challenge as a supervising producer. I'm like, yes, that sounds great. So, he made it clear it meant I was going to have to leave Survivor, which was the biggest television phenomenon ever. But it was a decision that I thought was right at the time. So I went ahead and did Eco Challenge. Then we got 2 Emmy nominations that year, one for Survivor and one for Eco Challenge.
Oh, that's incredible.
Which is crazy.
And when you made the decision to leave Survivor and go to Eco Challenge, was it after Survivor had aired, so you knew that the phenomenon that it was?
I did.
And
but it was Mark was something he needed, and I would do anything for Mark at that point. And I was proud to do it. To direct Eco Challenge was also an amazing feat. And then it was a perfect combination. It's crazy that I'm even talking about it because I was just happened to be the guy. Nobody worked on, nobody was in a senior producer position on Survivor, and then was able to, also work on Eco Challenge, and then be available to do The Amazing Race. Amazing Race was a combination of those two things, Survivor and Eco Challenge, because Eco was like a 350-mile race. And that was the biggest thing at the time. And here we were getting ready to race around the world.
Yeah. What stage of development or production did you step into Amazing Race?
Oh, pretty early on. You were asking about Survivor was 12 weeks out before we started shooting. It was 12 weeks. I think I was hired in November of 1999. And then we shot March or whatever. Amazing Race, same thing. It was maybe a little later. Maybe I had less time. I feel like it was 8 weeks or something to really figure out. I was not called the director, and back then There were union issues and all that stuff. It was kind of supervising producer, and I was overseeing the challenges too and doing a lot of the interviews. So it was just sort of a general producing term, that includes everything. But it was, it was, I forget what month it was, but I do remember the first day of The Amazing Race for sure. My God, here we go.
What was that like?
Well, it was just like, you prep and prep and prep. But we had, even though Survivor was groundbreaking, it was all doable. Like I never thought, oh God, we're right in over our heads. But I mean, the day that I was like directing the opening of The Amazing Race, and there's helicopters, and there's all the teams are lined up with their backpacks, and I got 12 other crews ready to start running with these teams through Central Park, and we got vehicles to get all the producers to jump into, and there's a plane to, multiple planes to catch at JFK. And it was like, I literally, Bertrand's been around the world a million times, and he's amazing, and camera operator and producer, and he and I looked at each other and we're like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're sending all these people around the world, and we told people we could document it. But we literally said to each other, there's nobody better to take a whirl at this. And a few minutes later, I was like, okay, Phil, you ready to say go? And check all the walkies, make sure everybody's ready. And he did his thing, and they said go, and they just started running. And then I realized, I was standing there because I was still directing on walkie and everything. And I'm like, I got to get on the plane too. That was a realization that lasted for the next 28 days. You got to keep up with them.
Wow. That is so cool. I love that you worked on both of those shows.
I know. And it's just luck. It's truly luck.
So at this point, you're like fully invested in this reality genre. You've accepted your fate that this is like a career and you're enjoying it. You've given up the angsty artist inside of you that wants to write, screenplays. And so then what? Did you do multiple seasons of The Amazing Race?
Yeah. So I don't know how detailed you want to get, but Amazing Race 1 was, I forget what week it aired, but I think it was 1 or 2 weeks before 9/11 that it started airing. I could be wrong on this, but I think it was like week 3 of The Amazing Race was, airing. 9/11 hit, and the whole thing just like, I mean, they didn't cancel the show, but they delayed it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
all reality shows kind of went off the air temporarily because it was just news around the clock, and so everything was just completely changed. And I remember talking to Bert, and I was trying to get my own show going. My partner Jim Jusko and I, we were trying to get our own thing going, and so he had sort of developed a show that was going forward. So it was my first executive producing opportunity. And then Amazing Race came back on the air and didn't do very well, honestly. My memory is, I could be wrong, but I think it didn't do that well first season. The ratings were not as strong as they needed to be to sort of justify the budget and all the effort that went into it. And I just personally, I was like, oh man, how could I be so wrong? Because I was, even with 9/11, I just thought Amazing Race was the one thing that could give Survivor a run for its money, even though it's on the same network. I felt like Amazing Race was another one of those unbelievable concepts that was going to stick around for another 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah.
Which is now on its 32nd season, I think. But anyway, it didn't do well. So I went ahead and took this other job. I called Bert first. I said, hey, I got this other opportunity to do a show called No Boundaries up in the Yukon and British Columbia, and it was going to be a great experience. So I took that, and then he called me. I was right in the middle of it, and he called me and he said, Brady, we got picked up for a second season. I'm like, you're kidding. How do we get picked up for a second season? Like, there's no way. And it's because Les Moonves knows what he's doing. He knows a good thing when he sees it. And he said, we're doing a second season, which is a huge commitment from a network. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I put all that work into Amazing Race and I can't do Amazing Race 2. And that's what happened.
And you couldn't do it because you were already on this other show.
I was contractually obligated to complete my other show. Yeah.
So let me take a quick tangent here, because as freelancers and especially as producers, I feel like I've come up against this situation countless times, where you're on a show, you've made a commitment to do this project that goes until a certain date, and you get a call from something that sounds a lot freaking better than whatever it is you're doing. So you're on the show No Boundaries, which I don't know that I've heard of it, but you get a call for Amazing Race 2, but you don't just jump ship and go take the kind of flashier, more appealing offer.
I didn't. It was our own company too. It was like the potential launch of our company.
Gotcha.
And I was trying to, climb the ladder and all that stuff, and ended up No Boundaries. Didn't do well, even though it was a really cool show. I was really proud of it. It did great in Canada. Actually beat The Amazing Race in Canada in ratings. It's crazy. But it didn't do well in the U.S. And then it went away after 13 episodes. And I went back to The Amazing Race. And this is a good lesson for your listeners too. Even after you work your way up and you're climbing the ladder and you're working hard. And, I was executive producer of No Boundaries. It was the thing I was shooting for. And I had been supervising producer on The Amazing Race, senior producer on Survivor, supervising producer on Eco Challenge. I went back to The Amazing Race as a producer.
Oh, you took
which is like
a demotion.
3 steps down as a producer because I loved Bert. He asked me. I love the travel. I love The Amazing Race. I believed in the show, and I needed a job.
And that higher level position was just occupied by someone else.
Screech, Hema Screech Washington, who's now the head governor. I forget his title of the Academy, Television Academy. He's a great guy, but he did great. He was elevated to co-EP of The Amazing Race. So I was working under the guy who replaced me. Which is fine. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
But I was a producer for another, I think, 4 or 5 seasons on The Amazing Race and traveled all over and scouted with Bert. Just he and I would scout Russia or whatever. And so I knew the show inside and out. So I think I was valuable to Bert. But there was no other position for me other than producer. And you know what? Sometimes you do that. You just go work and you keep working. And I did get a call at that time for Big Brother. So this just crosses over with Douglas's
Doug Ross,
podcast.
yeah. Episode 2 of the podcast. Go listen now if you haven't.
Seriously, you should, because it all connects. And Mike,
Mike Miller, the challenge producer.
Yeah, because he ended up working on The Amazing Race for years, and I was in charge of challenges on the first season, and then somebody else, Jim Butts, whom he replaced. Jim Butts came in and did the challenges for Amazing Race during season 3, 4, and 5, and 6 when I was there. I think that's the right timeline.
Yeah,
but Doug, was on season 1 of Big Brother, and strangely, so Allison Grodner, who runs Fly on the Wall, was working with Arnold Shapiro, who was the executive producer of Rescue 911. And Allison was a coordinator with me on Rescue 911. So all those years later, like more than 10 years later, Allison and Arnold called me and asked me if I was interested in being co-EP of Big Brother season 2. And I, just like you said earlier, I decided to stay with Bertram on The Amazing Race as a producer.
Yeah.
And didn't pursue, and they didn't offer me the job officially, but didn't pursue going on Big Brother as a co-EP, which would have been a great jump.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of loyalty involved in all that. And sometimes it doesn't work out short term, but it does work out long term. And I really believe in loyalty and going both ways.
Yes. And you make such a great point. And I have been able to sort of manage my career this way, where if you make a commitment to somebody to complete a project, to work until a certain date, even if you get, something that sounds better or pays more, you always fulfill the commitment that you made. Because, well, yes, like it may work out in the short term, like, I'm going to make a couple $100 extra bucks a month or a week, or, I'm going to have this higher title, whatever. You will have burned a bridge or just put a sour taste in somebody's mouth. And as you're explaining this, this industry is so interconnected that that's going to come around to haunt you at some point. And I think that most everybody, you're going to be better off by just like fulfilling commitments, maintaining relationships, than just like jumping as soon as the next best offer comes along. Because I think you'll just be known as the guy that just bails early on stuff, and no one's going to want to hire you.
It's true. It has to be something really, really special.
Yeah.
To be able to feel good about doing that. But it happens all the time. People do it all the time.
They do it a lot.
Editors do it. Camera guys do it. I mean, it just happens. But I'll tell you, I do remember the people as a showrunner.
Yes.
I have to say, and I'm not a vindictive guy.
No.
Totally whatever. But I do remember the people who left a show in the middle. And I'm like, wait, why did you even take the job? Like I interviewed you. I spent time on you, invested you. I've been training you on the show. And you're going to, it's not a good move.
Yes, it's happened to me as well on shows, and people always remember, people always talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't think it's not the right long-term plan or move.
And then on the flip side, as a showrunner, I love Bertram to death, but I think he felt like I had left him to go do the No Boundaries, even though I didn't. Like I told you the whole story, but you also have to let people, not hold things against people if they are just doing what is right for them at that time. they didn't leave you, but they went off and did another work for somebody else. And if they're not available when you call them, that's just the way it goes. It's
right.
the freelance
it's not
world. You can't be mad at them.
personal insult to you.
Right. I mean, I would love to go back and work with Bird or Mark, but I've moved on to other things. That's just the way things work.
Yeah. So you did 3 or 4 seasons of The Amazing Race.
Yeah.
And then at what point did you end up on Extreme Makeover? Because I do want to talk about that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It's probably...
No, don't worry about it.
Too many details here. You have to edit a lot of this out.
No.
Well, there was this Base Camp Films in the middle. So Jim, Jessica, and I said we were trying to get our own company going. So after The Amazing Race, we did, even though No Boundaries didn't succeed, we did get our company up and running. We did 4 or 5 series. We did a series called Filthy Rich Cattle Drive, which was on E! And we got to go to this big cattle drive with sons and daughters of celebrities. And we did a show for Discovery Channel, a car racing show, which was kind of cool. And so we were up and running.
So you're creating and pitching and producing your own shows.
That's right.
As the production company.
And being called to serve as production services company on some of the projects. And it was great. It was mostly cable stuff, which was fine at the time. And it's hard to know, anybody who wants to get into this side of the business on the reality side, there are ups and downs in terms of owning your own company versus being a person for hire, And at that time, network television was still the big game in town. This is 2005, 6, I guess, 2005, 6. And so we were committed to our company and building that out. Even though I was getting calls once in a while to go run shows or be a director or something, and I would do here and there, but the company was the thing. And then I got the call for Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and it had been the show that I had been looking at on the air. Like, wow, if there was any other show besides The Amazing Race or Survivor that I could work on or eventually run, it was Extreme Makeover Home Edition. I mean, Tom Foreman got it all going with Endemol, and I just loved it. I loved everything about it. It was like everything that I stood for in terms of trying to make programming that is, that's entertaining, but also moving and hopefully makes people feel a little bit better about themselves. Amazing Race does that. Amazing Race is like, it's worldly. It teaches kids about the world and, relationships and all that stuff. But Extreme Makeover Home Edition is on a totally different level in terms of humanity. And I got the call to come over and be a co-EP. Along with the current executive producer was Denise Cramsey at the time. She's amazing. So she hired me, and a guy named Rob Smith at Endemol hired me to be the co-EP. It was two entirely separate units. So Denise did 11 episodes, and I did 11 episodes. But she was the senior, executive producer on the whole project.
Yeah.
So she was the showrunner. Then a few years later, I became a showrunner of Extreme Makeover Home Edition, which was incredible.
So what season did you start?
5. So
Season 5.
They had already done 4 seasons, which is a lot. I think it was episode 73 or something when I joined, and I just drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, we all did.
I mean, come on. I was crying on set like every day and giving these impassioned speeches to the crew, like, you guys will never see anything like this again in your career because this is really special,
Yeah.
And the camaraderie of the crew is just extraordinary. So, so I said to myself, I'm like, man, I'm going to stick with this thing. It doesn't get any better than this. I'm going to take this thing to 200 episodes. And this was in season 5.
Yeah.
And I expressed that to my wife, and then next thing I knew, it was episode 212, 5 years later.
That's unbelievable.
And that's when the show had, every show runs its course. 9 seasons was it, and ABC just felt like it was time to go and replace it with a scripted show, and we were very, very sad. But best 5 years of my career for sure, and without a doubt, the most rewarding 5 years.
Yeah, and I think that is true for almost everybody that worked on that show. Like everybody, 'cause I was only there for the last year, season 9, but I'm still in touch with a lot of people that worked on it for much longer than I did. And there's just something special about that show and the experience that you had working on it, the connection you had with the families, with the crew members, the travel, whatever it was, that just people just talk about it as if it's like the peak of like not just their career but like their life. Like, it's just like I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but like I remember coming in the beginning of season 9 and everyone is talking about the power of the show, and they're just like, we're changing lives here, we're making the world a better place.
Please,
and I was like so skeptical. I was like, come on guys, this is like a freaking TV show, like let's like have some perspective. But then I went out to my first build. and you meet the family. You see how much this means to them. How you are literally changing someone's life, and the way that the community. That to me, that was the big thing. The way the community rallies around these people, and everything's donated, and people are volunteering their time and making food for the crew and everything. I mean, it's just such an experience, and I was like all in. Of course, I'm bawling, and I'm just like, well, this is the greatest thing ever. And I truly loved it. I mean, one of my, I don't know if it's a regret, 'cause it's nothing I did, but I wish that I could have had more time on that show and just had, gotten in sooner and gotten to, like, do that more times, to go through that process more times.
But you got it canceled instead.
Yeah, I was the kiss of death. So let's talk about just a little bit about Extreme, just the production thing. 'Cause I don't know, like, I'm sure some people may have remember the show fondly and, may not know just kind of like the technicality, logistics of how it works. So, explain just like, how is it possible? How did it happen that this crew of people would build a house, tear down a house, and build a brand new house in 7 days? One of the main questions people always ask me when they heard that I work on the show, they're like, "Oh, it was actually longer than that, right? Like, oh, that wasn't real, right? Like, that's editing." I'm like, no, everything is real. It really happened. So how did you do it? How did the team do it?
Well, I remember, it's funny because I remember when they were asking me if I would do the show, I did have like a little secret lunch with somebody. I'm like, come on, what's the deal here? You guys, what am I getting myself into? You guys have, like, you hire all these people to come in? They're like, no, they're actually local volunteers who build the house. I'm like, well, how long does it take? And they're like, it takes 7 days. That's what they
just
say.
Like they say on TV.
I'm like, oh, well, okay. Well, do Ty and the designers really do anything? I'm like, no, they actually work, and they do what they say they're doing. It's like, wait a minute, it's all real?
Yeah.
I had a hard time believing it, just because when you watch it and you think there must be some sleight of hand, but there isn't. It is, everything you see on the show is totally real. It is an incredible builder, who donates his or her time and gets all of their trades and all of their vendors and the local lumber yard, and everything is donated, gets them all together. Thousands of people show up after we use local press, to tell people to come out, and we tell the story of the family. People show up, put on their blue shirts and their hard hats, and they get to work. And we have the schedule, an amazing schedule of how to build a house in 7 days. And so sometimes there are builders who don't know how to do that, so they look to us for guidance on how it is done. And that was all done before I came on the show. So there were incredibly talented people on the construction side and on the television side that were able to have these two schedules, these two worlds, come together in this giant schedule. And as long as everybody follows that, it happens. The plumbers have to show up at 2 a.m. All 10 of the plumbers have to show up at 2 a.m. But as long as they do, it gets done. And that's nice to know, I think, for viewers out there and for producers and people who want to work in television, that an Amazing Race is the same thing. It's exactly what you see. It is actually, Amazing Race is probably the most genuine reality show out there. Yeah. Every time I see it, I'm like, I can tell you, no one cares who wins on the production side. Nobody's hoping that one team wins over another. It's just whatever happens.
Yeah.
And Extreme Makeover, just looks more unbelievable when you think about building a house in 7 days. I would come out on day 2. So we'd, knock the house down at like 6 o'clock on Monday. And then I'd go to the hotel, for 8 hours sleep and come back or whatever. And there'd be like a fully framed house. Yeah. And I would literally, the word miracle doesn't come out of my mouth very easily, but it would occur to me like, that is borderline miraculous that just happened. And it was all because it was built with love and passion, and also a lot of efficiency. So that's the building side, and it is all attributed to the community. It really, it's all local people.
Well, I remember it wouldn't work. Like, we'd have families that would be great families and, have these really, really powerful stories, but it like really all came down to like the builder. If you couldn't find a builder that could work in that area, then it would be like, it's just that. I mean, yeah, I remember that.
It's true. It's really true. And then, I can't say enough about Ty and the design team.
Yeah.
I mean, Ty was, people talk about the hardest working person in the business.
Oh man.
Nobody was working as hard as Ty. At that point, he was going back and forth doing 2 homes at one time. So we had a staggered schedule.
Right.
So we might have a home in Washington, D.C. and another home in, Austin.
And there were 2, I'll interject too. There were something that's like so amazing and impressive to me, that there were 2 completely separate, fully staffed crews of, every department, like just multiplied times 2, that would work simultaneously in different cities around the country, that they'd be shooting at the same time.
Exactly right. And I don't know if I'm revealing like industry secrets here or whatever.
I don't think so.
But yeah, it's a 3-day offset schedule. and Ty and the jib operator
Yeah, right.
were the only, at least when I was on the show, were the only two people who were at the door knock and the reveal of each of those builds at the same time. So it would be Ty in Washington, D.C., and then Ty finishes and he stays another day and does a whole bunch of work on the house. And then he would go to Austin, door knock on another house, go back to D.C., do the reveal and the bus move, which is a huge thing, and be there for a couple of days and then go back to the other one. It was like a 14-day schedule for Ty to do 2 episodes, at the same time. So he was incredible. And I just can't say enough good things about Ty. He loved the show and still does love the show. And he was the lifeblood of the show.
I ran into him randomly. This was maybe a year ago, just at this restaurant in Venice. And I had worked with him, but not super closely and not for that long, obviously. And so he walked in to pick up his food, and I was like, "Hey, Ty Pennington, you probably don't remember me, Jeremiah." He's like, I was like, "I worked on Extreme." He's like, "Oh, brother, how's it going?" He gave me a big hug, and we just chatted a little bit. And I remember I just asked him something like, "Do you ever miss it, or are you glad that's over?" And he put his hand on my shoulder and looked me so deeply in my eyes, and he was like, "Brother, that was the greatest experience of my life." And I was like, wow, he meant it.
yeah, he did mean it. And it's nice for people to know that, out there in the ether, that the person who was the talent on the show.
Yeah. No, it wasn't bullshit. They were all invested in it. And, it was really a beautiful thing to witness.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you now, because I know people are going to be curious, because obviously it's been published in the trades and stuff. They ordered Extreme Makeover Home Edition. Again, they're rebooting it. HGTV picked up 10 new episodes. And
they did?
I think so.
No, I'm kidding.
And you told me we could say this here on the podcast, which may be the world premiere announcement, new information to the public. But you're going to be showrunning the reboot.
Yeah. I guess depending on when a person listens to this podcast, if they listen to it tonight, it would be a real world premiere. But yes, they gave me a call, and Endemol gave me a call. They remembered my role on the show those last 5 seasons, and it was very nice of them to think of me, again. And I do remember wrapping out the 9th season of Extreme, literally handing the last box, to the PA who had to go take it to storage, to Endemol storage.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, wow, if someday this is going to come back. I don't know if it's 5 years or 20 years, but someday it's going to come back, and it's going to be a problem. Not because of me, but it just so happens that I was the guy that was in that role. If they don't have somebody like me, or somebody who's seriously involved in the show,
right.
Otherwise, it will be like season 1 all over again, which was really apparently very, very difficult, and things go wrong.
Oh, sure.
So over those 9 years, we learned a lot, and I learned a lot in those last 5 years. But fortunately, they called me and felt like I was the guy, and yes, so I just closed my deal a couple of days ago, and we just got started. So it'll be a different show. Same feeling. It'll be very touching, but it won't necessarily go as deep into some of the family stories, that we've had in the past, in terms of just, kids and, illnesses or whatever.
Right.
We'll touch on some of them, but it's not like a requirement for the casting of the show. We want good families who have overcome, hardship, for sure, and who deserve a break, and maybe they've been nominated by a local church or Rotary group or whatever. And then they of course have to have the need there, but we'll also we'll scale back on a few things. We're not going to build mansions or anything, so it's not the old extreme in that manner. It's not we're not going to build a 4,500 square foot house for a family of 3. It's just not it's not necessary. It's a different time and different age.
Yeah.
So we are very intent on building homes that are right on for that family. Whatever their needs are, that's what we want to give them, including their dream design of the front of the house, the curb appeal, and then anything inside the house that they need, we'll give it to them. But we're not going to give them anything more than that.
When are you starting, development and pre-production on it?
I started the other day. I started like 2 hours after I signed my contract. We started. So we're starting right now, staffing up, and this is now, we're in January, the end of January of 2019, and over the next 15 to 17 weeks will be preparation and casting and finding the builders and taking care of the locations. It's a huge thing. We have a big advance team that goes out and makes sure that that the builder's on board and they understand everything, and then the municipalities have to be on board. Like we need 24-hour inspectors on site. We need fire and police support. We need all of that stuff. So that needs to be prearranged before we commit to going to that town.
Right.
Because if they can't provide those things, then we don't go. And then it'll be 15 weeks of production. So we'll do 10 episodes in 15 weeks, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to double up, have 2 builds happening at the same time, and then then we'll be done. We'll post through December, and hopefully it'll air in January of 2020.
Do you think that you're going to have any trouble? Now 2019. The country's been through a lot. Like, do you? I don't know. Do you think you're going to have the same ability and good luck to like rally communities around one family and get everything donated like it was before? I don't know. Are you worried about that at all? Or do you feel like human spirit and love will prevail, and this is, you find the right people and the right, families and communities? This is still something that will work.
Yeah, I'm concerned about it just from a financial point of view. We don't have the budget that we had from ABC. So if only 50 volunteers show up and we need 500, then it is a problem. It's a financial problem. Oh my gosh, we may have to actually hire some people to get this thing done, which would be terrible. I can't remember when that happened last, but that's a concern. But I feel like the magic of Extreme Makeover Home Edition outweighs any of that. We went through the housing crisis. I mean, we were on the air in 2008. And managed to stay on the air, through 2012 during the worst housing crisis that we had in decades.
Right, yeah.
And we were worried about it at that time. But people rally, man. I've seen unbelievable things happen with volunteers, and I have so much faith in the American volunteer spirit. It might be uniquely American. I'm not quite sure, but I've had friends of mine like in Brazil, like, do you really do that in America?
Yeah.
Like, people come out and help build a house for your neighbors. Like, yeah. Hundreds of people show up, and it's pretty exciting to see that. So I am not worried about it. I think people will show up in droves, and especially, there are parents who watched Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and now they have kids, and they're going to get their kids out there, and I think it'll be fine. It's just the HGTV-ness of it all. ABC and ratings are down generally for all the networks, and I think there might be not as much. We might have to over promote. We have to promote more than ABC did, just to make sure everybody know, hey, this is on HGTV now, and
right,
come on out.
I mean, it might honestly be like just what the country needs in a way, because it is one of those experiences that like just transcends politics. It transcends point of view, religious, whatever. Like, it just was about just the human spirit and just like community and love, and those are themes, and those are things that really do just like that, they break down boundaries and borders. And so
totally volunteerism, I became kind of an expert on volunteerism through all that. I would, I'd be on set at 2 a.m. and I'd see some grandma like planting mums in the front yard of this house, and I would talk to them. I would be like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing? And they're like, I just, I was a teacher for years, and I've always wanted to do something like this. Or they know the family and they wanted to come out and do it, and they're just by themselves volunteering. And I just to put a lot of thought into what motivates people to volunteer and what they get out of it when they volunteer. And I actually ended up joining like Rotary Club. Rotary is a service organization, a worldwide service organization, after Extreme Makeover. Like, I felt this void in my life.
Yeah.
5 years I was giving away, doing these amazing things for these families. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, I just felt the need to give back. And it sounds so whatever. But I do encourage everybody out there to look at their lives and try to figure out at what point in your life are you going to give back in a significant way to your community or to your church or to your country. It is absolutely vital for happiness. I really believe that. Mm-hmm. And it's the people who don't recognize that volunteering and giving back is crucial to your well-being. Those are the people who just go through life and don't enjoy it the way it can be enjoyed.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love that you've really been able to have this career that straddles the line between like doing good for the world, doing good for people, positive storytelling, and working in production, because there's plenty of production. I may be guilty of working on some of those shows.
Well, we got to work.
that aren't so positive. But yeah, it's just so cool that you seem to really love what you do, and you have this sort of niche almost of like feel good, big epic television.
Yeah, lucky for me. I'm just super super lucky. I would expand that to say, isn't it a shame that? Like, I would say I work in reality television. That would be my sort of, if somebody's asking me, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work in, reality TV. And they're like, oh, And and I'd say, well, I work on Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And they go, oh, okay. Well, that's
we
not.
were going to
that's
ask you to leave.
Yeah,
but,
really. But they literally say that's not reality television. I'm like, no, it is. Come on, give the genre a little bit of credit. I mean, I know it's terrible in so many ways, but every genre has terrible content. Every genre has just junk. There's so much scripted stuff that I can't even stand.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, a cool This Is Us comes along. Like, okay, yeah, I'll watch this, and that's normal. I just think it's a bummer that the whole industry and the whole world has just come down on reality television as negative and terrible, all of it. And here I've been working for 30 years and I've done wildlife programming and traveled the world with Amazing Race and done, 100 plus homes for needy families. And I'm like, that's reality television too. So give us a little bit,
Yeah, you
love.
definitely occupy the brighter, happier, shinier side of the industry, which is awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like I want to be a spokesperson for the genre, because it's like people just don't give us enough credit for doing some good stuff here and there.
Yeah. Are you able to say, or do you know what the designers and hosts and on-camera talent for the reboot will be?
No, it's too early. It is. We're at the creative stage of figuring out, do we want to bring Ty back? And HGTV obviously has a lot to say about all that, and Endemol does too. So that is TBD. We'll see. I hope we can make everybody happy.
Yeah.
Because we have old fans of the show, and then we want to reboot it with freshness, and it all has to be figured out still.
Yeah. So cool. So lastly, to start wrapping things up, what advice do you have for people that are young, that are breaking in, that are working in the industry and want to move up? Like, just what are some just good pieces of advice for people, as they navigate a career in this industry?
Yeah, it's you always ask that. That's the and everyone does. That's like the good solid question, and I can only relate it to myself. It's like, obviously that's where it all comes from, advice. But I kind of sucked at pushing myself. I was really bad at that, and I still am, honestly. Even though it sounds like I've done a lot of shows, but it took a long time. This is my 33rd year in television, and it was a slow ascent. But I see other people, really being more aggressive and following up on leads and taking people to lunch and all that stuff. And I just wasn't very good at that. And I always felt like I was selling myself. And I figured if I worked hard and had a good attitude, that people would notice. And some people notice, but it helps to make a little noise along the way. So and I've said this to somebody else on another radio thing, but I think that if I had it all to do over again, I would have made sure that I followed up more with people and pursued people whom I admired, instead of just kind of waiting a little bit for people to call me and to just wait for things to happen. And It's a general obvious note, but my personality was not one that I didn't feel comfortable like writing people letters and calling them and saying, hey, I'm available. But now as a showrunner, and this is important for your listeners too, as a showrunner, I get all the time. I get people sending me resumes and following up, and there's people who will contact me like on the same date every year. Yeah. And I don't think, oh my God, I can't believe they're bothering me again. I'm like, oh, they were pretty cool, and of course they're reaching out. They're looking for work. That's totally fine. So there's a disconnect there. Or there was a disconnect there from me. I didn't want to be that guy nudging someone. Yeah. So therefore, I just kind of took whatever jobs were like right in front of me. Worked out okay. But could have been a lot faster if I had been more aggressive, and maybe even directed my career a little bit more. Yeah. But at the same time, it's a wild ride. Maybe I would never have done reality television if I'd stayed on the film thing, and maybe ended up in real estate because I couldn't, failed as a film director. So there is a certain point where you have to go, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm going to go in this direction for a while, and then really pursue it once you make that decision. Yeah.
Is there any advice that you were given through your career that really stuck with you, that someone said to you at some point?
No. Oh, that's terrible. I can't think of anything, and that's terrible. I'm sure I've got so much advice from Mark and Bert and all those guys. They're all great. It was really more watching incredibly talented people work. That I picked and chose certain things from certain people, and I always appreciate them being themselves, being passionate, being artistes in some way. Like Bertram is a kind of an artiste guy. Mm-hmm. I love that. Mark is an incredible manager and also very creative, but I never saw him get mad like once. And that's a real tribute. This is the epic name in reality television, Mark Burnett, who started Survivor.
Yeah.
Never seen him get mad. And I really appreciate that. And I've sort of aspired to that. And I think I've somewhat succeeded. So there's a little bit of everything, from people, but not necessarily words of wisdom. I never had a mentor, which is weird. Because you always know you're supposed to find a mentor, right? You're going to do a business and look for someone. I never found that one person that I thought would kind of help shepherd me through my up and down career. Lots of people helped a little bit along the way here and there, which I appreciate, but not one. So I don't know. Maybe I would have gotten more advice if I had been more aggressive and found a mentor like you're supposed to do.
Do you mentor people now? Do you like to take an active role in like younger people's careers?
Totally. So I'm not patting myself on the back, but I really love that. I love it. It's my favorite thing to do, really. Like I'll find somebody on set who's a PA and notice that they're working hard, and they're not looking around to see that the people are watching them work hard. And then, if I spot talent, man, but I'm one of those EPs. Like I want the show to be as good as it can be. So I want the best people working on it. So I'm looking for hardworking, talented people all the time. And if I spot them, I'll literally pull them aside and I'll be like, hey, what are you all about? Why are you here? What are you doing? What's your goal? And if it feels like they have the goods, then I will definitely nurture them. And I it's my favorite part. I've probably sort of mentored, a good dozen people over the years, men and women, all different races. It's great. In my world, a few of those have more Emmys than I do, and it really kills me. It kills me, man. Sammy Aziz, he was like on Extreme Makeover season 6.
All those Shark Tank people, they got so many Emmys.
I love Sammy. I'm super proud of him, but I mean, like, wow, how'd that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brady, I'm such a big fan of yours. I respect you so much. I've loved the time that I've gotten to work with you and under you, and I really, whenever I talk to people about you, the number one thing I say is that Brady Connell is the nicest man in Hollywood, and like you really, really are. You just bring this just this calming energy to whatever room you're in, whatever set you're on, and people just love you and look up to you and respect you. So just like, kudos to you. You're an incredible producer and a incredible person. And thank you for coming on my podcast.
Well, thanks. I can think of a few people who would argue with about that, but thanks for the compliment.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. All right. That was my chat with Brady Connell, the nicest man in Hollywood. I have to imagine that Brady's inbox is about to explode with messages from the hundreds of people that worked on the first iteration of Extreme Makeover Home Edition, looking for jobs on the second. Such a fun show. I can't wait to see what Brady does with it. You guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you are, do me a big favor. Go on to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Leave a rating. Subscribe. Write a review. It's so, so helpful to get the show out there, get it into more people's ears. I'd really appreciate any help you can give me in the show. If you want to reach me, shoot me an email. It's show, SHOW, @workingclasshollywood.com, or find me on Instagram. It's Working Class Hollywood. Thank you guys for listening so much, and I will see you next time.